Hey guys, it's Jen. Welcome to another Pride and Grit Spouse Spotlight. I am excited today to bring you a guest all the way from Rome. So I am happy to introduce you to Michaela Rosales, and she's going to talk a little bit about what she's up to in Rome and online. And I'm excited to have you meet her, as I am as well, because I have not met her before either. So these are always fun for me. So if you want to go ahead, Michaela, and kind of give us just the highlight reel on your military spouse story, that would be awesome.
First of all, buongiorno, and I'd love to give you a little bit of a background on me. I have been a military spouse for almost 19 years this June, but honestly, I feel like my journey on this path started back in college when my husband decided to join Air Force ROTC. I became very involved in there and didn't even realize what I was getting into. At that time in college, we both were like, oh, we're just playing Air Force.
Right.
Um, but it became part of our story and still is a big part of our story. And the Air Force has just taken us on this crazy journey of moving to some amazing places. We've been in Japan, we're in Rome right now. We've seen a lot of deserts.
Not your favorite?
No, not my favorite. I mean, I don't mind them, but I prefer the ocean.
Sure.
Wrong branch of service for that.
Right.
But honestly, the military has allowed me um, to figure out who I am as a person. Um, and that goes all the way back to being a brand new spouse at 21 years of age. We got married right out of college. My husband is 2 years older than I am, but 1 year in education. And graduating, getting married the next week, moving across several states, landing in Texas for that first assignment, and then having to figure out what it looks like to make friends,
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to find a job and
Right. All the things.
all the things that you're like, wait, what just happened? Can I just call my mom and figure out what am I supposed to do? She needs to tell me what to do. And um, honestly, I know later in the show we'll talk about my biggest blessing and biggest challenges with Air Force life, but leaving home is scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's scary, it's hard, but honestly, it was the best thing that we could have
Yeah.
ever done.
Yeah.
My husband and I were high school sweethearts, and being able to kind of cut that umbilical cord
Mm-hmm.
was a blessing.
Yeah. No. I appreciate that. That's awesome. It's good to get to know a little bit about you. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that kind of leads me into an interesting question. So I usually will ask all my guests, and with, variation in experience from 2 years to, 20 some plus years. So it's always interesting to see what people see differently. But I'm curious, in your 19, what are some of the things during that journey that you would kind of look back and say were the hardest pieces?
Mm-hmm.
And then what would you say is probably like the thing that you really, over those 19 years, have treasured the most about mill life?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say the biggest challenge is navigating the uncertainties, right? I mean, our life can change at the drop of a hat, whether we're dealing with a deployment or a no notice move, or our orders get changed. Just recently, last year, our family was actually en route to Hawaii, and now we're sitting here coming to you from Rome. And that's not the first time in
Right.
19 years that's happened. So there's so many uncertainties, but I would also venture to say that the uncertainties and the biggest challenge has also been our greatest blessing.
Mm,
Um, you know, Learning how to navigate through those uncertainties with grace, um, and confidence has forced me to step out of my comfort zone. You know, I didn't know what it the first time we arrived at our very first duty station, I was 21 years old, ripe old age, just graduated college. Had no idea what was out there in the world other than, being a college student. Now I've gone from college student to I'm married and I have to go find a job, and I've moved across several states. Um, and if I may share a really
Yeah.
quick story, I remember getting a phone call. Like, I don't even know if any of our stuff, the pictures had been hung on the wall or anything. And I got a phone call from another spouse, and she's like, "Hey, you don't know me, but I want to invite you to a spouse social tonight." My husband was in pilot training at the time, and I'm like, "A spouse? So what's that? Okay, what do I have to bring? What do I have to wear? Where is it?" And she's like, "Oh, it's at so and so's house, and just show up at her house at 7 o'clock and bring a dessert if you want." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And, same day, I only had a few hours to prepare. And I remember sitting on my couch, and it was probably 6:15 at night. My husband walked through the door, and I'm like, I can't do this."
Mm-hmm.
"What? You can't do what?" I'm like, "How am I supposed to go walk across the housing area and go knock on this random person's door and say, 'Hi, I'm supposed to walk into your house?'"
Right.
But that was kind of the beginning of stepping out. And that moment was a defining moment for me that has allowed me to do hard things and scary
Mm-hmm.
things
No,
over the last
yeah,
17 years.
I love that story because I suspect many of us have similar ones. And I suspect there's kind of variation between those who kind of waded into the deep end of that fear,
Yeah.
and and those who didn't and maybe came to that a little bit later. But there is a certain, I think, just a certain amount of some of it's personality certainly,
Yeah.
but some of it too is just being comfortable with that unknown. It's also like an unknown. How is this going to go? What's the relationship going to be like? What do I talk about? Especially as a brand new spouse, like you don't even, you don't know enough to even like have talk about stuff. So I love that you actually
Exactly.
went and like took that leap. I mean, that's probably indicative of what came next, and you're, being continually engaged, right?
Exactly. And I wouldn't have classified myself at that point in my life as an extrovert. I
Mm-hmm.
uh I wasn't, the life of the party. I liked being around people, but I didn't, it was never, I didn't like the limelight. I didn't like anybody making a fuss over me, and I wasn't sure if I was just going to show up to this place and stand in a corner. But what I found was a family.
Yeah.
And that sense of family has been with me from the beginning. And yes, we're moving every 1 to 3 years, and um, but there's always that sense of family. And it doesn't mean it's easy when you
Mm-hmm.
get to the next place to establish that family, but at least you have people to call upon that know where you're coming from.
Yep. No, that like that um, shared experience, it just
Yeah.
makes such a difference. And it's interesting, as I've asked this question, I've had people that have talked about the fact that they perhaps didn't take that step and maybe didn't for years,
Mm-hmm.
and then later, maybe 7 years or 10 years in, kind of all of a sudden went, oh wow, like what have I been missing all this time because
Right.
I didn't take that that leap when I had an opportunity, or I had just decided that it didn't fit, or whatever the case might have been. But then look back on it and go, man, what kind of relationships and what kind of extended family did I not take advantage of, and be able to really enjoy and benefit from at those other duty stations. So it's interesting to see. I hate to call it a regret exactly, but I think there's a little bit of that to it, where people like, wow, if I'd made a different choice that first time or that second time, how would that have adjusted the outcome during those
Yeah.
years. So.
I think the biggest thing is that you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I've made it my life mission as a military spouse as the years went on to take that opportunity that was such a defining moment for me and make sure that I seek out those new spouses, or maybe they're not new. Like you said, they've been in the military, their spouse has been in the military for 10, 15 years, but there's a new opportunity waiting at every turn. And
Right.
so, my husband had the honor of being a commander at our last assignment, and my only mission with being his spouse at that time was to reach out to new families that were coming, so that before they came to us, they already had a safe place to land. And that was my biggest blessing. Like I said, being able to reach people and draw out that insecurity so that they can then, change it into more confidence and come to things and realize that we want to be there for them.
Right. Yeah. No, I think
So,
it's, yeah, I love that you said that, because it was one of our experiences as well. And perhaps because it was an Oconus experience where I think there is just this natural safety net of support because we're all kind of in it together away from our extended families.
right.
But I feel like it's so invaluable to ensure that early on, those new families are welcomed and that they feel supported and they feel like they're sort
Yeah.
of part of the team, if you will. And it really seems to transform their own experience. The more they feel part of that family, the more they want to participate with that family and they want to contribute to that. And really just kind of enriches not only their experience, but also enriches the experience of everyone else as they, become part of that. So I love that that was a focus for you.
Yeah, and I think one thing to remember for anybody that's listening is that we are all different, and we all come from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different personalities. Um, and for me, I realized that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a bad thing, and it might take a little bit of time to find your fit,
Mm-hmm.
but with so many people, it's out there.
Yeah.
And I know, we see all sorts of stuff online about spouses being mean and they can tear each other down, but not don't lump everybody in one
Right.
category.
Yeah. No, it
So
definitely takes, I think, a little bit of courage to be able to have that negative experience and be
mhm.
able to kind of keep it in perspective and be able to look at what could come beyond that, to your point,
Right.
that, okay, that wasn't the group for you, right? That
Yeah.
those aren't your people, but yours do exist. And if you continue to kind of put your foot forward and continue to look, to your point, like, unless you're at the teeniest duty station ever, there's a lot of people out there to become
Yeah.
part of that family for you.
Well, and we have definitely been in some isolated locations.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So tell
But
me how all of those experiences and your perspective, how did that lead you to what you're doing now? Kind of what was the evolution for that? And tell us a little bit more about your work.
I would love to. It's a long evolution to get where I'm at now. As I said, 19 years of it, and continuing to grow each and every day and find out more about myself. But honestly, what the military has afforded me is an opportunity and a path of self-discovery and self-awareness. Um, because we move every few years, because you're forced to find your fit. Um, and with, like I mentioned earlier, the rapid changes that occur in our life, whether it's our kids are going from one stage of life to another, or friends are moving, or
Mm-hmm.
you're the one saying goodbye, or your husband gets a no notice deployment, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
I mean, I can
The laundry
laundry
list.
list of transitions. I've come to realize that because we transition so often, I can get caught up in the roles that I play, whether
Mm-hmm.
it being a military spouse or being a mom, or being a friend, even, that I forget. I tend in earlier days, I would tend to forget who I was.
Mm-hmm.
So when it changed, I found myself in this period of, oh, wait, what am I supposed to do now? Who am I? And a very real example of that is, which I think a lot of people face, is bringing your first child into the world.
Mm-hmm.
So you're transitioning from being now a single person to a married person to a military spouse to having to being a mom, and getting caught up in what that means, and then realizing when your kids don't need you as much anymore. Just to back up, I have a
Mm-hmm.
16, 13, and 8-year-old. You kind of look in the mirror and think, who am I? And when I went through a mourning period, when
Mm-hmm.
I stopped breastfeeding, or when I stopped teaching to stay home with my son. Each of those times I kind of mourned who I was before. And then I realized that through the military and through all these transitions, that I'm still me. And I just had to figure out who me is, so that, because life is going to continuously change. So when I know who Michaela is to the core, then I can handle those transitions without losing myself along the way.
Yeah, no, I love that, because identity is definitely one of those that I think a lot of people have a hard time with, and it seems like it kind of sneaks up on them.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not this sort of freight train that we saw coming. It's just this moment where you kind of just wake up and look in the mirror and go, okay, I don't, either I don't recognize that person, or I don't sort of know who that identity is beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Um, beyond the mill
The
spouse, or
roles.
beyond the parent, or
Yeah.
beyond those roles. So I love that. So how does that, so you went through that process, and then
Yeah.
how did that sort of lead you to what you're doing now?
Yeah. So to back up, what I did is, I realized through, again, self-discovery, self-reflection, that teaching and educating is to my core. I went to school um, to be, well, I went to school. I ended up getting a degree in education because, like I said, my role of a mill spouse sort of started in college.
Mm-hmm.
And I will remember the day I was a pre-med student, and I thought I was going to be a neonatologist when I grew up. That was my lifelong dream. I told everybody that from the time I could talk and knew what it was. um, and did internships and all sorts of stuff. And then I remember having a conversation with my husband's, the Air Force ROTC commandant's wife. And she was not discouraging. We were just having a conversation, and she was a seasoned spouse. And she just said, what does this look like for you? I know you and Alfred, is my husband's name, are extremely close. You have plans for the future. So, what does it look like for you to pursue being a doctor, and him to pursue the Air Force? And that was my first moment of like, well, I don't know. It was just, I hadn't
Mm-hmm.
really given it much thought. And the more and more I did think about it and pray about it, I realized, for me, I didn't want to be in medical school for the next 10 years and him go on with the Air Force,
Sure.
and then risk that not working out, our relationship not working out. And through careful prayer and consideration, I decided to change my major, became a teacher, had difficulty finding a job like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people out there, because they know you move, and
Right.
lack of experience because you move, and so on and so forth. um, and then I got pregnant really early on with our first child, and I had decided I wanted to stay home. um, Sorry, this is a long-winded
No, 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 no.
explanation, but
You're good.
I took a childbirth class. And let me just state that in those early days, money was tight. And, a childbirth class was a little bit of investment at that
Mm-hmm.
time. I think it was like $300,
Right.
which was a big deal
Right.
for me. And I remember telling my husband, I said, I don't care what it takes. I'll do without anything
Whatever. Yeah.
to make this work. And I did. So I saved up, our pennies so we could pay for this childbirth class. And that was another defining moment for me, because I learned that my opinion, my thoughts, and having autonomy over my body mattered.
Mm-hmm.
And after having a wonderful experience, not just because of I had a natural childbirth, but because my husband and I learned how to communicate about things that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know we had to communicate. My husband, like, he was there for me on a whole different level than I would have ever expected him to be. And from that, I was like, I have to share this with the world.
Mm.
And so for 15 years, I have taught childbirth education,
Okay.
um, and been a labor doula.
Oh.
And provided for so many military spouses whose either spouse wasn't available or whose spouse was so scared that they just needed
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of extra support,
Yep.
and encouragement. And in the last few years, I've realized that my services of, in a way, transitional coaching have expanded from not just helping a woman and a couple transition into parenthood, but really focusing on military spouses and, like I mentioned earlier, navigate the
Mm-hmm.
uncertainties that this life brings.
Wow. I love
So
that. I had a doula technically with both children, although the second one she had to be on the phone because it didn't go like the timing didn't work out so well. But
yeah,
oh my gosh, like the the best partner in that process. Like I have such affinity for folks who do that because it's just it was such a gift to us at the time.
yeah.
So I love that. So
Trust me, it's equally as a gift, as much as a gift to the doula, because just being invited into that space
hmm
is, it's such an honor.
yeah, no, that's all. I love how much, you probably maybe feel this way as well. Like from, our first child is now 12, and so then it
Hmm.
was very much not sort of talked about or even a norm.
Right.
It was very much this far fetched thing, that people did, and I feel like it's become a little bit more mainstream with an uptick in midwife use and an uptick in doula use, and so
Right.
it's great to see that those partnerships grow for sure. But so you mentioned kind of the transition from, sort of just that initial moment of, childbirth and so forth, and into really helping folks transition into parenthood, and now military spouses kind of transition into other areas of their life. So tell
Right.
us a little bit about, kind of from a service standpoint, what does that look like if someone's working with you? What are some of the things you're kind of helping them work through?
Yeah, well, it all comes back down to either rediscovering or discovering your personal identity. I know that sounds pretty broad, but for those military spouses that are new to this life, my biggest encouragement is don't lose you
Mm-hmm.
amongst it. Instead, use the service to grow you in who you already
Mm-hmm.
are. And then for those of us that are more seasoned and have been doing this for a while and find ourselves kind of buried underneath the roles of
Mm-hmm.
military spouse and mom and volunteer and
Mm-hmm.
whatever else, let's kind of push back the stuff that's on top, and find you again, so
Right.
that you can continue to be the best spouse you can be, to be the best mom you can be, and also recharge those superpowers so that you have something to give and you don't get burnt out and don't feel overused, overworked, overstressed, over anxious.
Well, and
um,
I think to some of the things you'd said, if you can be grounded in that identity, then I think it becomes just significantly easier to kind of figure
mhm.
out where to plug in, where not, and be able to
Yeah.
kind of set your own sort of personal boundaries as to um, what are the things that really support how you as a person, want to be, and the goals that you may have for yourself. And I
Right.
think that that personal identity, I think, also tends to help us kind of keep from getting bogged down with
Hmm.
responsibilities that we take on that aren't really ours to take on.
Right.
So that I think is an important, kind of just fundamental
Honestly,
thing.
right. And honestly, the whole thing is to let go of the guilt, the shame, the judgment that so many of us
Mm-hmm.
feel with the weight of the world on our shoulders, because we're put into situations that um, we're not necessarily trained for. I mean,
Right.
who trains you to be a
Nobody.
single parent? Who
Right.
trains you to help other people navigate these uncharted waters
Mm-hmm.
of, my husband just deployed, I haven't heard from him in a week, I don't know what to do,
Mm-hmm.
my mind is going all
Mm-hmm.
over the place. There's not, it's not like we necessarily have this handbook.
Right.
um, and so what I like to do from a service standpoint is really first and foremost cut the comparison.
Mm-hmm.
So we learn about who are we comparing ourselves to and why? Because when you know that, when you're scrolling social media, we're there to try and feel connected, and yet so many times
Mm-hmm.
it makes us feel the complete opposite.
Right.
Um, and so what you know, I'm currently pursuing my master's, almost 40 years old, decided on a whim that this is, not really a whim, but
Yeah.
this is, what I wanted to go back and do. And that came from me being confident in knowing who I am
Mm-hmm.
and who I want to serve. And so really helping spouses figure out that core so that you do say no, and say no with confidence. You can say yes to things, say yes with confidence.
Mm-hmm.
You can set up, if you want to work, but you also want to stay home, what does that look like? And
Mm-hmm.
what boundaries do I need to put in place in order to make it effective for everyone? Not just me, but also for my kids, for my spouse, for my friendships that are honoring to everyone around me. Um, and that's what I really want to do for others, is not make them go through the 19 years it's taken me to get there, and let's get there now. And so you don't have this long trail of, I let people walk all over me, I
Right.
felt burnt out, I'm frustrated and angry at the military. um,
I'm curious, because you have this 19 years. I'm curious your perspective on whether or not, in some ways, there's almost been a little bit of a shift in the fact that I feel like we're having this conversation more often, right? We're talking about identity,
mhm,
we're talking about boundaries, we're talking about pursuing, your own dreams alongside your service member, and what that all that looks like. And so I wonder if, not that it's easier at all, like to be coming into this now, but I don't feel like those conversations were happening 15 years ago,
no,
when you were young, when I was younger. Um, and so I love that they're happening, but I'm really curious to see, what does that look like as you fast forward, as folks come into military life feeling like it's okay to have a dream. It's okay to have your identity. It's okay to figure out a way to pursue those and yet still have the service life. What does that look
mhm,
like as they go 15 years forward? Do they, I don't know. I find it all like very, just a fascinating experiment of sorts. Because I feel like you and I didn't have, those weren't the conversations that were happening.
no,
And I love that they're happening now, but I'm so curious to see what that impact has long term. Because what are the, when they get to 19 years, what is it? What is the challenge going to be? How is it going to be different? So I'm curious, like among, people you've worked with, do you see kind of a difference in, I don't know, and not an expectation, but kind of, in how they view their own role in all of this?
well, let me start by talking about about some of those differences, like you mentioned. For me, back in those earlier years, there were a lot more
Mm-hmm.
stay at home spouses, not necessarily just moms, but
Yep.
those of us that didn't work outside of the home because, well, let's face it, it was harder. It was hard
Well,
to
there,
find a job. There wasn't remote
yeah,
working.
exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
like there is now. We did not have the technology that we have
Mm-hmm.
today. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
my husband's very first deployment was waiting for that 10 to 15 minute phone call,
Yep.
maybe once a week, twice,
Maybe.
every other week.
Yeah.
And if you missed it,
Right.
you
That's
missed it,
it.
and you
Yeah.
didn't know when you were going to get it again. And then the whole time the operator was listening to your conversation.
Yep.
um so for the people, if I'm forecasting
Mm-hmm.
what it looks like in 15 years from now, you know, the opportunities are abundant.
Mm-hmm.
And I, I really do feel like you can have both. You
Mm-hmm.
can have yourself and you can work and you, or what, maybe
Or
it's
what,
not even
yeah,
work, maybe
whatever.
whatever it is. And still be supportive of the service. Now, I will say that that's where the transition needs to happen,
Mm-hmm.
because from what I've observed, it's it's still the all or nothing,
Mm-hmm.
mindset of, for example, when my husband was commanding, the one of the biggest struggles is involvement,
Mm-hmm.
is getting people to be involved, and that's a whole nother conversation, I think, with why that is. But oftentimes it's, maybe a little bit of a, what are people are going to expect of me if I
Mm-hmm.
show up.
Mm-hmm.
And truly, I feel like we should not have expectations of our spouses in, you have to be the secretary of this and you have to
Oh
be the
gosh, no.
this and that.
Yeah.
But instead, look at it, the connection, as what we talked about earlier, the family, the
Mm-hmm.
friendships, the network. And I think that's where this conversation is headed, with how we're seeing so many more people bring it to light, is the fact that we're all trying to lift each other up
Mm-hmm.
and support one another, because the service, it needs to be there. Where it's never, that part is never going to go away. We're still going to need people across the branches of the military service. And I'm proud to stand next to my husband for his service. But I'm not going to lie, there's moments where I'm like, gosh, don't I get to come first? Doesn't our family get to come first?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do I always feel like a second rate citizen? Your job, you have a resume that follows you, you have a rank, you have people know who you are without you even being there. And that's now the difference with technology, is that people can know who you
Mm-hmm.
are
Right.
without even being there.
Yeah. No,
Um,
it's so true, and it is just fascinating, I think, to kind of watch what happens, and also see, to your point, like these second order effects, right? As people,
mhm.
um, you know, kind of retain that identity piece. What does that do for volunteerism, and does it impact it, or will there always be people that want to give back in that way, and still have the time to do that? So I think it's going to be an interesting few years to kind of
Yeah,
see things transition.
right. And my point is, say yes to the things that are honoring to you and your
Yes.
family. Say no to the things that aren't. Don't feel guilty into doing something that doesn't fit your personality or who you are, what you value. One of my current clients, we talked about this, and she was kind of trying to be everything for everyone, and it came out that one aspect of her life was not in harmony with her values.
Right.
And that's what I help people see, is what are those any energy drainers, and
Mm-hmm.
how can we fill up more of our life with the energy, the things that add to our energy as
Yeah.
opposed to take away to our energy. Because that to me is true self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And self-care is not about being selfish in the sense of, well, it's just about me, 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 me. I need to have a career because of this. I need to, whatever, fill in
Mm-hmm.
the blank. But instead say, okay, in honor, in order to serve you better, these are the things that I need to, again, supercharge my powers, so that I can be there and I can supply, I can be the best mom
Yeah.
I can be the best spouse um, I can be the best friend that I can be,
Yeah.
without feeling like at the end of the night, oh my gosh, I just don't want to close my eyes, because if I do, I have to start all over again.
I mean, it's very much a mindset shift. It is very much just kind of owning what you need to be able to be your best self. And when you're
Yeah,
your best self, you can give to the things that where I think you're really going to have the most value, because it's all from a place of um, it's all from a positive place. It's not like I have to do this. That's, I want to do this, and I
I
want to
get to, or
contribute.
yeah,
Yeah, I get to contribute in these ways. Um, but you've got to spend the time to kind of define those. And I think sometimes in this life, it's really easy to end up sort of thrown in, and then you kind of go, wait a minute, like how did I get here? You know,
Yeah.
how did this become the path and the tasks and the, you know, whatever. So
Right.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. So you're really just helping people kind of walk through that, which I think sometimes, I mean, speaking for myself, sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it's like, you know, can you see the forest through the trees? Like when you're in the middle of it, it's you may know something isn't quite right, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Having someone to help coach you through that and help you see it in a little different light. And to your point, like be able to help someone go, oh, wait a minute, you've told me these are your values, but yet these are the things that you're doing. You know, where's the disconnect, and how do we shift you in a way that helps you really honor, you know, those things that you've said are what you want for yourself.
And the top and the bottom of it is my story is not the same as anybody else's,
Mm-hmm.
and nor should it be. My story is my own, and your story needs to be yours. But let's make a happy story. Let's have a joy. You know, not every day in life is going to be happy and joyful, but we have choices that can help move us in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I just love coming alongside people, and it's not about telling them what to do, but watching you discover
Right.
what you want. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
No,
amazing. And
I'm sure it is.
sorry, even going back with the childbirth, like it's not about what type of birth you have. It's
Mm-hmm.
about creating your birth story and honoring yourself through the process
Right.
to have the best experience. And that's what I do both in that setting as well as in the general life setting.
Yeah. So are you still like active in your sort of doula efforts as well, or as you have you sort of shifted more into this kind of coaching, life coaching realm?
Yeah, so I have an online childbirth class that I offer, and I I moved it online because I was tired of reinventing myself every 1 to 3 years. And
Right.
let's face it, it takes a whole year, if not longer,
Mm-hmm.
to establish yourself in any one given place. I also offer, at this time being in Rome, I offer virtual doula services, which with COVID-19
Right,
stuff,
which is
it's
super
very
helpful.
fitting.
Yep.
And then I offer life coaching services, and in the words of my business coach, poo-pooed the notion of life coaching because I was like, what's that term? It's just so like everybody uses it, and I don't even get it. Um, but but honestly, what it is just cheering you on, motivating you, keeping you accountable to who you are, and helping you set boundaries around your time and around your life so that you can honor everyone else around you and yourself, first and foremost.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. So if folks
Yeah.
want to find you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and my handle is at Honest Talk International. So there's two T's, it's honest and then talk.
Mm.
International. And then my website is www.honesttalkinternational.com. And if I can leave you with one little phrase, it
Please.
would be let's be resilient, not resentful.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
That's awesome. Well, thank you for hanging out with us today. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. As you can tell, I love to
I know,
chat.
right? We can talk all day. I know that's a problem. Sometimes I feel like, okay, we gotta cut.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this spotlight. I hope you enjoyed that as I did. We will catch you on the next one next Wednesday. We'll see you here. Thanks so much.